Mornye is coming out soon, but with the reveal of Amos and Luke coming in the next update, is it actually worth it to pull for Mornye? That's what I'm going to be talking about in today's video by discussing Mornye's biggest pros and cons. Now, before I even dive into the specific things that make Mornye special, I want to say that one of the biggest things in Mornye's favor is that she is going to be a universal character. And when I say a universal character, I mean a character like Shorekeeper, someone whose pull value is so high that people consider her to be the only must-pull character in the entire game. And yes, I do mean to say with this, that Mornye's pull value is the closest thing we've gotten to Shorekeeper when it comes to the pure support role. Characters like Booling and Verena wish they were Mornye, which makes sense because Mornye is a limited 5-star character. The reason she is so universal comes down mostly to her outro skill, because she actually has the most powerful universal outro skill in the entire game. Shorekeeper, Booling, and Verena all give 15% damage amplification. Same goes for Baizha. However, Mornye just directly power creeps this by giving us 25%. That extra 10% may not sound like much, until you realize it's almost double of the other outro skills. And this outro skill is in fact the primary reason that Mornye is a universal character. Now obviously there is more to her kit. She has a signature echo set that gives 25% attack, and from this echo set we can also deduce that she increases the off-tune rate of the party. However, this outro skill alone already makes her pretty universal. So if you just want another Shorekeeper type character, Mornye is definitely the type of character you're gonna be looking out for. Even in Double Pawn Matrix, she does have 2 Vigor just like Shorekeeper, which means that Kuro knows exactly what Mornye is meant to be. Then for my second point, I am still going to choose to ignore her tune break mechanics, because now I'm going to talk about the fact that Mornye is a fusion character. Now why is being fusion so relevant? I thought that you believed attributes didn't matter in this game. Well, that's partially true. For example, I don't care if 2 DPSs are the same attribute, because the only thing it's really going to affect is their team building options and the resistance of the enemies they fight. So when you say a DPS's identity is defined by their attribute, I'm going to have major issues with this. But in the team building aspect, I can understand why you would mention it, which is why it's so important for Mornye. Mornye being a fusion character means she is going to have synergy with Lupa, who is one of the strongest sub-DPS characters in the game. Lupa is the glue that holds together the fusion element, and the fact that they now have a universal fusion healer means that Lupa Mornye is going to end up becoming one of the strongest cores in the entire game. You're able to slap this with literally any fusion DPS, and it's going to be strong no matter what. Previously, we had Brand Lupa, which was also a very strong core, but it focused a lot more on the personal damage of the characters involved. Whereas with Lupa Mornye, it scales a lot stronger with the strength of your main DPS character. Someone like Galbrenna will be able to use this core a lot more effectively than someone like Chishia, entirely because Galbrenna has a lot more personal damage. I would not at all be surprised if the Lupa Mornye core ends up becoming the strongest core for every single fusion DPS in the entire game, and this includes Galbrenna. The sheer amount of buffs Lupa has access to, combined with how universal Mornye can honestly be powerful enough to even be better than Choyo and Shorekeeper for a character like Galbrenna. So if you have a strong fusion DPS but you don't have a good team for them yet, getting Mornye and Lupa might be one of the best decisions you can make. But now that I've discussed those 2 points, it's time for me to finally get into the thing that makes Mornye special, being her synergies with Tune Break. Mornye, as I've alluded to before, has the ability to increase the off-tune application rate of your entire team. This means that Mornye is most likely going to be the de facto best support for tune break based DPS characters. And I believe Ameth is going to be the first one of her class, meaning that we're going to end up with a team of Ameth, Lene, and Mornye. Mornye is most likely going to be stronger than every other support here because of that off-tune application rate. But that's not where it ends, because she also has an additional buff in her kit that I have neglected to mention so far. Mornye is capable of applying a mark to enemies, and when you cast a Tune Break skill on an enemy with this mark, As long as they have Toon Rupture or Toon Strain on them, this mark will be upgraded. This upgrade lasts for 8 seconds, and it's going to give your DPS an additional 40% damage bonus when attacking that enemy. This is a very strong effect, and if you're able to have very good uptime on this effect, it means that Mornye is simply going to be better than characters like Shorekeeper, even when you take away her off-tune application. Meaning this buff is simply going to be something that widens the gap between these two characters for Toon Break related teams even more. Now, I'm not saying that Shorekeeper is going to be useless for Toon Break teams. That is far from the truth. But Mornye being the unequivocal best in slots is most likely going to be the outcome here. This means that if you have an interest in the Toon Break mechanics and you want to get a team focused around Toon Break itself, you're ultimately going to want to get Mornye, assuming you want to get these best in slot teammates. But obviously, it's not all sunshine and rainbows with this character, because there are some negatives to discuss. But I think they can all really just be summed up in one point, being that when it comes to being a generalist support, she's not going to be able to beat Shorekeeper. Even when Mornye comes out, Shorekeeper is going to be the best generalist buffer in the entire game. Now, why is this? It comes down to two major aspects for me. First of all, the availability and uptime of her damage bonus mark, and second of all, her rotation time is looking to be quite a bit longer than Shorekeeper's. Starting with the availability of her mark. First of all, it only lasts for 8 seconds. 8 seconds is not a lot of time, and it means that you're most likely not going to have access to it on your sub DPS character. And when it comes to your main DPS, there's a little bit of your rotation that will also be unable to benefit from this. You will be able to circumvent this by simply timing your Toon Break skill correctly. For example, if you're playing Augusta, you would want to time it for right after you use your Resonance skill, so that most of your big hits will still be capable of benefiting from the damage bonus that this mark gives. However, because you have to time it, you also won't have the ability to sometimes get 2 Toon Break skills per rotation. Now, to be entirely fair, on bosses this was always going to be a bit iffy anyway, because they're most likely going to be dead before you even get the chance to have 2 Toon Break skills per rotation. But still, 8 seconds is not a lot of time, and there's going to be quite a large amount of your rotation that simply will not be able to benefit from this buff, and thus ultimately your uptime is going to be a concern. The availability is also an issue because you need to have the shifting statuses on the enemy in order to actually get the interfered mark, which means that currently, you need to have Lene in your team to actually get access to this mark. No Lene, no dice. So in most teams you won't even have access to this mark. And then the second thing is the rotation time. Shorekeeper's rotation time is currently around 4 seconds, assuming you have her intro skill. This is pretty short, as you probably are able to guess. 4 seconds is not a lot of time. And then for Mornye's rotation, it's looking to be around 6 seconds. Sure, it's only 2 extra seconds, but when you look at it from a relativity perspective, her rotation is 50% longer, which is quite a bit. Rotation time is one of the most important factors when it comes to determining the usefulness of an overall support. It's why a character like Buling or Baizha is never going to be able to match up to Shorekeeper, because their buffs do not outweigh their extra rotation time. It's an issue of damage per second versus damage per rotation, and usually, damage per second is going to be the more important metric. So ultimately, having a longer rotation than Shorekeeper means that her buffs are going to have to be bigger to compensate. And most of the time, this is simply not going to be true because of the earlier issues I have mentioned surrounding her damage bonus mark. But that's just my opinion on Mornye. Let me know what you think of her down in the comments below. And while you're down there, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Additionally, if you have any questions, be sure to check out my Discord down in the description below. If you just want to see more of me, you can check out my second channel, which is also linked down in the description. But that'll be all from me. Peace.